If you've been thinking about adding an ADU to your California home, you could be eligible for a $40,000 grant. That's $40,000 of free money to help you get it done. I'm covering a lot of the details in this video, and at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you what you need to do to apply for that grant. So keep watching. So first of all, what is an ADU? ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit, but it's more commonly known as a granny suite or a granny flat or an in-law unit or an in-law suite. Basically, it's a smaller version of a home that's often located in the backyard of an existing home. So you have the main home in the front and this ADU in the back. It can also be attached to an existing home, and that's called a JADU or a junior ADU. So in recent years, ADUs have become really popular, especially in the state of California. The state wants to build more housing, but in order to do that, it's coming up with some creative ways. And one of those ways is to make the guidelines for homeowners to build these units on their existing properties a little bit easier. So the state of California passed Assembly Bill 881. So it made the guidelines for building ADUs the same across the entire state. So what that means is that the state decided what the guidelines were going to be. They made it a little bit easier, and all the cities have to accept it. They don't have a choice. They can't make it more stringent than what the state has said. So a lot of cities are just now catching up on changing their building codes to match those of AB 881. So if you go to like your city website, your building site, and look up the code, it may not actually be currently accurate. I know a lot of states have had trouble just getting their documents updated. So go in there and ask them. Ask specifically when they're going to be updated and what guidelines they're currently following. They should be following AB 881 guidelines. The reason the state's doing this is because they need more housing and more affordable housing. This is a great option to have homeowners build on land that they already own. So what are some of the benefits for a homeowner to add an ADU to their home? Adding an ADU could provide space for multi-generational living. So if you have parents or grandparents who are elderly and maybe they're still living on their own, but they really need more help. Not as much help as they would need moving into a facility, for example, and you want to keep them at home, being taken care of by family, but you still want your separate personal space. Adding an ADU is ideal for this type of situation. You can have their own smaller space in the back of a family home. They're close by to check on them. They can often babysit if you got kids. That's really helpful. So that's just one of the options. Another option is sort of in reverse. If you have younger adult children, maybe they graduated college, but they're not quite ready to buy their own place. And maybe they want to save money for their own place to buy their own in the future, or they don't want to spend the money on rent. Or like in California, living in a really expensive area, it's really hard for younger people to get started and to get their own place. So adding an ADU to the back of your property could give your adult child some privacy and be close to home and be a lot more inexpensive. Plus, it increases your property value. And another reason you as a homeowner might want to add an ADU to your property is for income. You could rent out your ADU to somebody else and collect rent from them every month. And you're still in your own home. It can help you in so many ways. If you're short on cash, it could help you in that way. If you're looking to retire early, it could help you build up your retirement savings over time. And if you're not planning to stay in your home for the long term, it would increase your property value when you go to sell. And there's one more option. Maybe your home's become too big for you, but you don't want to leave your neighborhood. You like your neighbors and you want to stay close by, and you're not ready to just give it up and move into a smaller place. You could build an ADU for yourself to live in while you rent your main home to someone who needs a larger space. You could collect a lot more rent this way. It keeps you in your neighborhood and in your home. So those are just some of the reasons why a homeowner might want to consider building an ADU on their property. And now that AB 881 has eased the restrictions and the guidelines for building, there are a lot more options. You don't have to have a huge lot to build anymore, and you don't even need to add parking. But before I get ahead of myself, let's get into more details. Now, if your current home doesn't have enough land space to create an ADU, and you'd really like to get one done, if you're in the Bay Area, I can help you find a new home that does have the space you need to build an ADU. Now let's move on to talk about the $40,000 of free money you could potentially get. California Assembly Bill 881 was passed to encourage people to build, and to sweeten the deal, CalHFA, not FHA, decided to offer a $40,000 grant, but the original income limits and some other conditions that they had weren't very desirable, and they only had one homeowner apply for the grant. Can you imagine? In the entire state of California, they only had one taker. Maybe they didn't advertise it well enough. I don't know, but only one person wanted $40,000 for free. So anyway, they went back to the drawing board and they made the guidelines even easier so that more people would apply. So keep watching. I'm going to tell you what you need to know to get the $40,000 of free help to start building your ADU. First, let's look at the requirements to get the $40,000 grant. First thing is you must be the owner of the property. Obviously, they're not going to give you a grant to build an ADU on a property you don't own. So that's a given, right? Okay, the property must be owner occupied. So that means you, the homeowner, and the person taking out the grant must live on the property. And it has to be for a duration of time. It can't just be that you moved in, you bought the place, you moved in, build, and then you're going to move out. There's some time period afterwards that you have to, has to be verifiable that you are actually living there for a number of years. It must be your main residence. So you can't go buy a second home somewhere else in California and decide to take the $40,000 and build it for your second home that you don't really live there full time. Now, there are income limits in place, but they are pretty generous. In fact, they were just updated recently. So as of June 6, 2022, for example, Alameda County, the income limit is $282,000. The income limit is $300,000 if you're in Santa Clara County. Now, I know in some areas that income limit may feel a little bit too low and you may make more than that on your income tax, but keep in mind there are still ways around it. For example, if a couple makes more than those income limits, then you can have just one person apply for the grant and you could qualify that way by only using one income. Another requirement is you have to qualify for a loan to build your ADU. Even if you have the funds to pay for it in cash, the grant must go through one of the qualified lenders. So you have to get a loan. The lender's selling the loan product and they're not going to do it if you're just going to turn around and pay for cash. So they're not going to really help you. In order to get the help from the lender to get the grant, you got to get the loan. Now, at some point, this was probably a deterrent for those people who didn't want to give up their very low interest rate on their existing mortgage and have to take out a higher interest rate loan. That sort of defeats the purpose of getting free money because it's going to end up costing you the same if or more in the end. But some lenders are now coming up with new products in order to make this not so much of a problem. And they're letting you take an ADU loan as a second loan so you won't have to refinance your first mortgage. Expect more changes on this to come. I anticipate that there's going to be more changes by more of the lenders on the list in the near future, especially with the rising interest rates. It's going to be even less people willing to give up those low interest rates and refinance an entire mortgage at 2 or 3 times their current rate, right? So if you can't find a lender on the list now that's going to give you a second mortgage option, I think they're going to be more in the future. That's just my guess. Otherwise, this program is just not going to work. The lender must be on the CalHFA website. I'll put a link in the description below to that website. So you can't just go to any lender. You can't just walk into your bank and say, "Hey, I want that $40,000 grant. Can you?" No, it has to be a lender on the website. And again, the link is in the description below. I understand that on that list, there's Redwood Credit Union that already has a few loan options that might get around the needing to refinance the main mortgage. So if you want to start now, if you want to get in there early rather than later, I'd start there. So those are the basic guidelines for the grant, but there are a few more details that you need to be aware of. And the most important thing that you need to know is don't start your ADU project by paying for things out of pocket thinking that you're going to go back later and apply for that $40,000 grant and get reimbursed. It's not going to work that way. The reason is that the grant is only for soft costs, meaning it's only to be used on things like the design, the permits, the site preparation, things like that. So no money from the grant can go into actual construction. You can't buy the drywall. You can't buy the framing material. You can't even buy a nail. That's not going to cover it. This is strictly to go into getting you started in the planning process of building an ADU. Now, if you've already gotten started with building your ADU, maybe you've been paying out of pocket and you want to try to get this $40,000 grant, but you've spent some of the money already, it could still help you anyway. You could use the funds to pay the closing costs on your loan, and you could also use it to pay the points down so you get a lower interest rate on that loan. And there's probably some other ways if you work with a lender to find out how you could use that money in this situation. But ideally, apply for the grant before you start building. Another thing to know, this grant isn't going to work for an owner builder or someone who wants to DIY this project, because a lender requires fixed price costs. They want to see a breakdown of what everything's costing in a list, and as a do-it-yourselfer or owner builder, they won't just take that as the actual cost. They need to have a contractor involved with all of the pricing for the finished product done. So who are they and why are they giving away $40,000? CalHFA is a California Housing Finance Agency. It's a local state government agency. Programs are offered often through lenders, and they offer things for down payment assistance programs, things like that. FHA is a federal housing administration, and it's a federal government agency. It's not the same thing, and it's not where the money is coming from. CalHFA typically offers down payment and closing cost assistance to first-time home buyers, and they're doing this ADU grant to help increase available housing in California. Now, a few more details you should know. There are no restrictions on who you can rent to. Once your ADU is built, you can rent it to anybody you want. It could be family, it could be a stranger, it could be your children. It could be for anyone to use. And you have to apply to the lender on that list. The lender, once you apply, is going to qualify you for the CalHFA grant. Another thing you need to be aware of is that this money is a gift from the state, and you will get a 1099. So there could be tax implications involved. And if you're at all concerned about getting a 1099 for another $40,000 that you receive from the state, be sure to consult your CPA to make sure it's not going to negatively impact your tax returns. Another thing to know is that this program is not designed for investors, but it can help somebody to begin investing maybe in their first property. So it's not designed for someone who wants to buy a single family property or someone who already owns a rental property to add an ADU to the back of that rental property. But if you are interested in getting maybe your first rental property and building it on your existing property where you live, it could help you get started with that. Now, one thing you need to realize is there is not an unlimited source for these funds. They will run out at some point. Be aware that there is a limited amount of money that is going into this grant program. It's not going to go on forever. Currently, there's a limit of $240,000 grants that they're able to give out. That might change. They may find funding from somewhere else. If this program turns into be a great success, of course, they'll probably add more money to that fund. But as of right now, it's limited to $250,000. So you don't want to wait. You want to make sure you get in there and get on that list, get qualified, and reserve some of those funds for yourself. So I'm curious, before watching this video, were you already considering this as an option for a family member or to create passive income and possibly retire early? Does the opportunity for this free $40,000 grant sway you in any way to get it done sooner? Would this $40,000 grant to build an ADU help you get your project started? Leave me a comment below and let me know how this $40,000 grant could help you. I'd love to hear how you plan on using it. If you'd like to know more about California's AB 881, be sure to check out this video next, and I'll see you in the next video.